Hello and happy Friday. We have made it into the end of the week and I'm tired. You can probably tell, but you know what? I'm excited to wrap up day 5 of this week with Deborah. It has been a good week as we looked at her story with Bayrak. And today we're going to close out with leading in complex systems. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the complexity of the situation she was in. But before again, let me just recap what we've already discussed this week. Day 1, we looked at authority that was already there. Day 2, partnerships without shrinking. Day 3, when others hesitate. And yesterday, we looked at courage without condemnation. So, again, today we're looking at leading in complex systems, and all of this has really woven together as we look at Deborah's story. So, let's talk about Deborah. When we look at her story, Deborah didn't lead in a simple system. She led in a time of conflict, fear, and resistance. And I'll unpack it a little more because I want you to begin to think about the complexity of the system that you're leading in as we look at it through the lens of Deborah. When we begin to look at this, in Judges 4, Israel was severely oppressed for 20 years by the Canaanite king Jabin and his commander Sisera, who commanded 900 iron chariots. So think about this. They had these iron chariots, 900, and the children of Israel had been in oppression for disobedience. Deborah, the prophetess and judge, commissioned Barak to rally 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun to fight at Mount Tabor. Barak refused to go without Deborah, so she accompanied him, prophesying that the victory's glory would go to a woman. And it did. Deborah's leadership brought peace, not because she avoided conflict, but because she navigated it wisely in the midst of this complexity. Her authority didn't disrupt order. She didn't come in making a scene, trying to be heard, trying to make a space. She just moved and she restored the order of Israel by going with Barak and doing what God had said. So this is what so many women are called to do today is to restore order, not to dominate systems. And dominate doesn't mean you're not leading. Because I think sometimes we hear a word, especially in the American culture, and if I say you're not to dominate, sometimes we think that means you're not leading or you're not respecting. Hear me, I want you to lead and I want you to be respected as that leader. But you're not in place, as we talked about a few days ago, where you take on everybody else's responsibility, where you own what's not yours. Not, I don't want you to dominate in that way. You're not to dominate systems and you're not there to escape them. That's not what Deborah did. She understood her responsibility and she understood the system and what Barak's responsibility was and what hers was. She led within the complexity without losing herself. Hear me, let me say that again. She led within this complex system, this complex situation without losing herself. Now, you may say, Chandra, what made it complex? So let me just highlight high level what made this complex. First, there was the gender role reversal in a patriarchal society where a woman would save them and not a man. Now, again, I'll say Barak had been called by God, appointed by God, as just as Deborah was. Deborah was a prophetess, and a judge, and she was fulfilling her role. But when it came to this specific assignment, military armies, people were used to being led by a man, not by a woman. So that created a layer of complexity in this situation. The children of Israel, as I said earlier, had fallen into idolatry, disobeying God. That's why for 20 years they were in oppression. So here again, we've got a whole nation of people in idolatry. And now you're coming in and God's saying, now it's time to deliver them, to save them. But they're worshiping other gods. Are they really going to listen? The Canaanite army had chariots of iron. Their weapon systems was more advanced than the Israelites. So now not only are they worshiping, the Israelites are worshiping in obedience, they aren't even equipped mentally or physically to really fight. So you see all the complexity, how sometimes we don't have the skills, we don't have the commitment, we don't have the training or our mindset. We're really not committed to the cause, to the vision, to the mission. And then the last really was Barak's refusal to go. What happens when you have people on your team who have signed up, who've said yes to the job, but they're not willing to do the work? They're not willing to step up. So I want you to begin to think about the complexity of your system as you think about Deborah's complexity. And I want you to ask yourself or think through this question. What kind of leader are you becoming in complex systems? Now, I like to pause when I ask these questions. If I were in a coaching session, I would want to hear the response because I think it's important for us to connect the dots and understand the systems we're working in. When you're in a complex system with people who I say have quit and stayed, they show up, but they're not willing to do the work. What happens when you don't have a team that has the skill set, yet you have to be able to accomplish the goals put before you? What do you do when you have a leader on your team who has the credibility, the capability, but refuses to do the work? What kind of leader are you becoming in these complex systems? That's the question. How are you developing and forming as the leader? When you begin to think about that, I want to talk about some steps to measure alignment and not approval. Because ultimately, I want you to be the best leader you are. How do you align even if no one gives you the approval? And the first thing is I want you to identify the system pressure. Write down one system or environment that consistently pressures you to compromise. I'm sorry, all these words are getting me my mouth tangled. I'm thinking faster than I'm speaking, right? I want you to think about one thing, one system or environment that consistently pressures you to compromise, right? So I'll use for an example, I have an employee who we vetted, they work, but when they show up, they don't show up fully. When I look at reports, it's hit or miss, right? Which means if the department doesn't get the work done, then it's back on me and the pressure's on me. Then I have to choose, do I do the work or do I spend time coaching and correcting, right? That becomes pressure over time. What system or situation is consistently causing pressure for you and causing you to have to compromise in some way? What does that look like for you? I want you to choose one alignment action. So decide on one non-negotiable value you will honor this week. So we're going into the weekend, but what's a non-negotiable value for you, right? You're going to be honest, you're going to be true, you're going to be committed, you're going to be trustworthy. Like, what is a value? You're not going to talk about a person, you're going to talk to a person, right? You're going to go to the source and make sure that the communication is clear, right? What is one non-negotiable value you will honor this week when you think about these complex systems and how they're affecting you? Then I want you to write, no matter the response, I will remain aligned with blank. Okay? Because it's alignment, right? I want you to be aligned. So no matter what happens, no matter a response, no matter an outcome, no matter a blip or glip, you're going to remain aligned with whatever it is you're trying to do. That's important, that you remain aligned with the goal you have. And then I want you to seal it by saying this: I lead from alignment, not approval. Now I'll go back to Deborah. Deborah knew who she was. She knew the call on her life. And her aligning with Barak did not diminish or minimize who she was as a prophetess, as a judge, as a wife. It didn't diminish her reputation. Whether people approved her or not, ultimately she was aligning with God and the word God had given to Barak to deliver the children of Israel. And I believe that when we put that in the context of we are aligning with the mission and the vision of the company, the goals, the values, right? And whether people approve of that or not, whether they understand that or not, we are leading from alignment, not approval. That really is ultimately why we're here if we believe God has called and placed us here. All right. So we're going to wrap this up because we have really walked through the story of Deborah with her authority, how she partnered strategically without shrinking back, how she didn't hesitate, and her courage. And now we're closing in prayer. God, I pray for the women leading in complex spaces. Give them wisdom, endurance, and peace. Lead and guide them, Lord, with confidence and courage, and let their leadership bring restoration, not depletion. May their light shine brightly in every space they lead. Amen. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful weekend.